I've had quite a few people this week send me links to this record cutter that's just been released in Japan by the company Gakken for the equivalent of around £70 or $85. Now, of course, at that price, it's clearly just a toy or a novelty, and they make this very clear on the box as well, but it's something that not all the articles about it have made clear, and I think that's why people were linking me to it. They were thinking it was more substantial than it was, but a vintage record cutter costs thousands, and the upcoming vinyl phono cut recorder that recently was funded on Kickstarter, the full price of that one's going to be around €2,000. Now, I'd initially put my pre-order in for that Japanese toy, but my estimated delivery date had slipped to July, and after watching a demonstration of it on YouTube, I decided it was a bit too lo-fi and it wasn't worth waiting for, so I cancelled my order. However, all these emails about that new Gakken kit reminded me that I'd still got one of their older kits I've yet to build. You may recall that I've demonstrated some Gakken educational kits before. There was the Edison wax cylinder recorder that didn't really work out, and it was a similar story with their cup phonograph kit, and those failures are really why I didn't rush into putting this third kit together after buying it back in 2017. However, now that I've got a bit more time on my hands, I think this might be as good a time as any to try and put this one together and see if it actually does anything, and we'll find out if third time's a charm or a strikeout. Now, this is a wind-up gramophone kit. It came out in 2008 and, like all Gakken kits, was only available for a limited time. Once assembled, it's capable of playing 78s, 45s and 33 1/3 LPs. It's also apparently supposed to be able to record sound too. Important to note, though, that they call this last feature more of an experiment. So, given my experiences with some of their other devices, I'm not expecting amazing results, but we'll see. But we're not going to find out by looking at the box, so let's start putting it together. The assembly instructions are in Japanese. Some Gakken kits have a downloadable English language version. Not this one, though. I think it's the newer ones that tend to have that. But I think the illustrations in there should be sufficient to follow. Now, until I saw this, I wasn't familiar with the term SP being used to refer to 78s. And I always associated EPs with the longer playing 45s, not all of them. I wonder if that was a thing in Japan. Seems like I'm learning something new and I haven't even started. Putting these kits together isn't difficult. Most of the things you need, including the tools, are inside the box. I say most, though, because there's always an occasional exception. This one wants you to have a bit of adhesive tape to hold this amplification horn together. Unfortunately, the only clear tape I have in the house at the moment is this thick parcel tape. But as this part's going to be hidden on the inside of the horn, I can tear a strip of this Gorilla Tape off and use that instead. The construction is done in small sections. Each of those are usually limited to 3 or 4 steps. It's important, though, just to double check the illustrations to keep track of the orientation of some objects. For example, you want to make sure the seam on that horn is hidden out of sight on the bottom, but on the whole, most things will only fit together one way, and they can all be taken apart again if you get it wrong. Now, I've only got the kits here, but if my experience with previous educational Gakken kits is anything to go by, when this came out in Japan in 2008, it would have been accompanied by a thick magazine. That would have gone into the history of the item being assembled. So in this case, the magazine would go into the history of Berliner's Gramophone. It would describe how it all works. That would be accompanied by illustrations and photos, so you'd be learning all about the subject, as well as making up your own version to practically demonstrate the principles. You can sometimes buy Gakken kits that have been imported to the West, but even when they're accompanied by the magazine, it's untranslated, so you're missing out on a large part of the experience. Rather than all these build a Ferrari model over 1,000 issues types of magazines, I'd much rather see a translated Gakken kit on the shelves where you just buy the one issue and you get everything you need. As you can see, the wind-up motor here comes pre-assembled on the base. From my previous experience putting all these kits together, they only tend to allow you to construct the easier foolproof parts. Anything too complicated or fiddly is already pre-done. The plaque I'm putting on here covers up a small tray. This is where you're supposed to store the pickup needles. It comes supplied with a few of these, but if this was a real gramophone, the recommendation is that you put a new needle in each time you play a record. If you need more, though, they can be easily found online. Now, this section I'm putting on the side, this holds a number of different adapters. You'll see the purpose of those later, but that's not part of the mechanism. The next job's to put these levers on. These are the brake and the speed regulator for the motor. I'll explain more about how those work later on. Given the amount of this kit that is pre-assembled, I do have confidence that it is going to do something once we get it all together, but it would have been nice if I could have put some of those other bits together as well. Anyway, we've got to put this bit on now. This is the turntable. You can see the puller here, 3 positions on the bottom there. Those are for the 3 different speeds. That's where the belt goes around. So once you want to adjust the speed, you move it up or down those wheels as appropriate. On the top of there, you can see some cutouts around the edge. Those will fit into the base of the turntable platter to stop the 2 things from spinning independently from one another. So once that's on there, you can just put the rubber mat on the top. So that is the turntable finished. This is perhaps the most important part of any gramophone. This is the sound box or reproducer. I say important because if that's not working, then just forget the rest of it. That has to go into the end of this section here. You can see it's a clamp which holds it in position, but if you want, you can release it and spin it around a little bit to adjust the angle of the needle on the record. On the other end of that arm is this little weird thing. That's there to hold the upper part of the horn. The lower part goes into the sound box and clicks into position. So once that's all in place, that whole arm, that beam, can be slid into this holder here, and again you can see that's adjustable, so once you've got it in position you can just clamp that down as well. And then the final part for this section is to put the counterweight on the end of the arm. This is also on an adjustable clamp that enables it to be slid up and down the end of the beam to the right of the pivot point and adjust the amount of weight that's put down on the record. And then the whole beam has to be slid back so that the needle will line up with the centre of a disc. And with that done, we can now just do a couple of little bits of tidying up, such as putting these accessories on that holder, and now we can get on and play a record. It comes supplied with 3 steel needles. Gramophone needles are made from soft steel, the idea being that shellac records are harder than the needles, so wear the steel down and blunt the end. Now, I've got a stack of 78, SP records, but many of them, like this one, will hit a content match, so I'm hoping a rendition of Jingle Bells is going to fly under the radar, unless I get a claim from Santa. But remember, this is where you heard your first Christmas record of 2020 being played. It seems like I've got the belt on the wrong pulley, so let me just move that along and we'll give it another go. Well, the good news is that it works, although the sound of that wind-up motor is a little bit louder than I was expecting. I mean, I know it's a toy, but still. By the way, a full wind-up gives you approximately 3 minutes worth of playtime. Anyway, let's take a closer look at the rest of the mechanism. So this lever on the right, that's the brake. That lets you wind the machine up, then store that energy until later. And then the lever on the left can be adjusted to vary the amount of downward force that it exerts on the circular plate at the bottom. I'll show you what I mean. If I start it up, you can see the weights move outwards and pull the whole assembly upwards. The noise you hear at the top of there is just the weights hitting the plastic speed adjustment lever. So if I move that lever, you can see how it pushes down on the plate at the bottom, which in turn alters the speed of rotation. This part is known as the governor. Restricting the movement of this allows the speed to be finely adjusted. So these are all the bits we can see. We've got a spring mechanism that turns gears, which in turn spins weights, which then turn more gears, which drive a belt, which spins the turntable. The belt is there to keep the noisy vibrating mechanism separated from the platter to avoid transferring unwanted vibrations through to the pickup. Oh, and just one more thing to show you before I move on. The arm has to be moved out of the way whenever you replace a record, and of course you need somewhere to rest it other than on the table. So they've included a neat rest mechanism that lets you swing the horn and sounder box out of the way, but when you bring it back towards the record, there's a piece of plastic that protrudes underneath, and that catches on the mount, which leaves the arm free to be placed on the disc. I just thought that was a neat little design. But let's move on now and try to do a recording with this. It's supplied with 10 thin plastic discs in the box, and there's quite an elaborate setup procedure to convert this from a player to a recorder. Well, first, of course, you wind it up, and then you place one of these white plastic discs on the turntable. And then you place a rubber disc on top of that, and then finally place a grooved disc on top of that. Now, the arrow on the grooved disc has to point to the cutout that's on the outer edge of that white disc. Next, you add an additional weight onto the end of the arm, and then you unclip the section that the weight has been placed on, and that hinges it down. And under here is a pointed piece of plastic which you move across and line up with the centre of the platter. Now, to get that to the right position, you slide that beam backwards before locking it in place. The counterweight on the far end of the arm is then moved to its inner position. The turntable is rotated so the arrows point towards the stylus, and the plastic part is positioned on the spiral groove on the smaller centre black disc, which is what will guide the stylus that's going to cut into the white disc towards the centre. And then you're off. Okay, here we go. I'm I'm shouting. I can see the needle moving inwards. I can't shout any louder than this. So hopefully this is recording something on the plastic disc. Okay, so about what I expected, but less than what I'd hoped for. However, I persevered, and after spending a lot of time adjusting angles and weights and shouting until I was hoarse, here's the final result, and see if you can spot what I'm reciting. Right, that's quite enough of that. Let's try playing a 45. Now, for this, we've got to use a bamboo stylus, as those steel ones are too rough on vinyl. You also get supplied with a set of cutters to reform those into a sharp point after each play. I'm really not expecting much from this, but we'll give it a listen and find out. Yeah, not exactly hi-fi, but since this is a worthless 45 that I bought with a load of others in a bundle for a couple of quid just to use them for testing purposes, I think we might as well find out what it sounds like when it's played back with a steel needle. I'm not going to try an LP as well. I mean, it's just another vinyl record at a different speed, and if you've been following along, you'll know that the results will be very similar. So let's sum this one up while listening to some music being played from it. The recording feature, well, that was a bit of a bust, but in all fairness, they did say it was an experiment, and not every experiment produces positive results. Being an acoustic device, it's really only suitable for playing shellac 78s, which it kind of does, although that noisy mechanism really detracts from the experience. For the sake of completeness, I did try greasing it, but it made no difference to the level of noise. Again though, this is just a toy. I do own a quality acoustic record player that I'm going to show you one day, and it's not like I'm expecting to get the same results out of an educational kit. And as far as the educational side of things go, I do feel that this provides a good introduction into how mechanical acoustic music reproduction works, although it's a bit of a shame how much of it came pre-assembled. But I think there's still enough here to spark an interest in this subject, especially for a young person. Even as an adult, I've had some fun with this, but when it comes to playing records, I think I'm going to continue using one of my other turntables. But anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.